Welcome to my channel. It was a typical weekday dinner. I didn't have much of an appetite, but my two sons were eagerly enjoying their macaroni and cheese. Jason, who is 15 years old, and Josh, who is 14, never forgot to clean their plates. Both were actively involved in sports and other usual teenage activities. At the far end of the table, my wife Carla watched over the family dinner, making sure everyone had enough of what they wanted. It looked like a scene Norman Rockwell would have been pleased to paint. The boys quickly finished and went off to play street hockey before it got dark. I was finishing my iced tea, trying to gather the courage to speak to my wife. She was at the sink washing dishes when I got up from my chair. "Next time you go to meet your lover, don't wear that red dress. You look like a $20 call girl walking into that motel room." She didn't even turn around, and as I was heading out the door, I heard a porcelain plate crash to the floor. For the next 2 hours, I mowed the lawn. Eventually, it got too dark to see anything, and I had to stop. I didn't want to go into the house. I didn't want to face her. Cleaning the lawn mower took me longer than usual. There was about half a liter of oil left in the can, so I took care of that. When I went to throw the empty oil container in the trash bin, I noticed a brown paper bag tightly crumpled and shoved at the bottom. Inside was the red dress and a set of red lingerie. The panties were stained, but I didn't need to examine them. I already knew who had done the dirty work. Carla was lying in bed behind a closed door. That was fine, because I didn't want to meet her gaze. The whole day had started off wrong. I had suspected that Carla had been unfaithful for several months. Since I didn't want to believe it, I tried to ignore it, hoping it would go away. But it didn't. It only got worse. My wife is a 4th grade teacher, and she usually leaves for school with the boys. This morning, she had a doctor's appointment and wanted to get her eyes checked, so she took a sick day. I leave around the same time. I'm a painter. For the past few weeks, I've been working at an apartment complex in Harrisburg, about an hour's drive from home. When Carla announced she was taking a sick day, I decided to quietly do the same. I've been painting houses for nearly 20 years. I enjoy the work, and I'm skilled at it. I was doing it when we got married, and it helped Carla finish college. I always thought my wife approved of my job choice, but in the past few years, I've noticed her making comments that suggest otherwise. When she introduced me to her friends, she never mentioned what I did for a living. In fact, she seemed to avoid it altogether. If someone pressed to know, she'd eventually tell them, but I could tell she wasn't happy about it. It was fine when I was paying for her college education and renting a house to raise the boys, but now I felt like a burden to her. I disliked attending social events. Carla was a good teacher. She earned more than I did and had better benefits. The health benefits from her union covered all the family's expenses, and she also had a decent pension. All I had was Social Security. She kept herself in good shape, and despite being just 150 cm tall, she made an impression. I think it was all about her platinum hair, which she kept cut very short. I stayed outside, waiting for her to leave. When she finally did, she was wearing a cute little red dress. She looked great in that dress, and I always told her so. However, it was a strange choice for a doctor's appointment. The doctor didn't have an office in a motel. Carla parked the car and headed straight to room 117, knocked twice, and went inside. That was all I needed to see to confirm my doubts. The young desk clerk was more than willing to give me the registration card in exchange for a $100 bill. I recognized the name but couldn't recall the face. Jefferson Gibbons had attended several events that Carla had dragged me to. He was somehow linked to the school board or the school district. I couldn't remember exactly which one. Jefferson drove a BMW and left it unlocked. It only took me a minute to grab his documents from the glove compartment. The car was registered to Jefferson and Darlene Gibbons. They lived at 321 David Drive in Lancaster, and that caught my attention. I recalled he was a member of the Lancaster School District Board. It also turned out he was married, and that was the highlight of my day. I wandered around town for a few hours before heading home. Carla was there when I arrived, as cheerful as ever. She was no longer wearing the red dress. I didn't stay home that night. I slept in my truck behind the warehouse of the company I subcontracted for. I was still sweaty from mowing the lawn late, but I didn't mind. I really wanted. Some coffee and eggs and toast would go perfectly with it. I was trying to kill time before heading home. I wanted to be sure Carla was gone. There was nothing in the house that I was attached to. I gathered all my clothes and stuffed them into garbage bags. I pulled out a few documents that I thought were important, like my birth certificate, passport, and the like. I quickly made a phone call. Darlene Gibbons. Yes, this is Bob Terrell. We've met at a few school events over the last few years. I can't say I remember. What do you want? I just wanted to let you know that your husband Jefferson spent the afternoon yesterday at a hotel in Reading with my wife. Carla. There was silence on the other end of the line. I waited for a response, but none came. That's all I wanted to say, Mrs. Gibbons. I'm sorry to bother you with this, but I couldn't just ignore it. Goodbye. 10 minutes later, I was on my way to Colorado to visit my Uncle Jack. I didn't want to leave the boys, but they were cheerful, and Carla could provide for them better than I could. She earned more than I did and was a better parent, except when it came to marital fidelity. I didn't leave a note or anything like that. I'm sure she would understand what was happening when she saw my clothes were gone. The boys finished school at 3 p.m., so I called Jason about 10 minutes after that. He had a cell phone that allowed incoming calls, but could only dial a few preset numbers. We thought it worked well. Jason, hi, it's Dad. Are you on your way home? Yeah. How are you? I just wanted to let you know I moved out of the house today. I'm heading to Colorado to stay with Uncle Jack for a while. I felt I needed to tell you and Josh what's going on. What the heck are you talking about? Why did you move out, Jason? The simplest and most considerate way for me to answer that is to suggest you ask your mother. From my side, it would just sound like an excuse. Your mother decided she wanted to change. I think she was looking for someone with a better job or status. I'm not sure. Either way, it turned out I'm no longer good enough for her. I'm going away for a while so she can figure out what she wants. I'll call you as often as I can. If I remember correctly, Uncle Jack's place doesn't get cell phone reception. Come on, Dad. Couldn't you work this out here? Isn't there some kind of counseling or something? It's not for me, son. Listen, your mom has a good job, and she won't have any trouble taking care of you guys. I'll try to call you sometime over the weekend. Oh, and don't tell your mom where I am or that I called you. Take care of Josh and try to stay calm. Goodbye, goodbye. I had just crossed into the great state of Illinois. Uncle Jack lived north of Ron Pass. It was more like New Mexico than Colorado. I don't know how he made his living or where he got his money. But he didn't seem to have any problems. He was married many years ago, but caught his wife cheating and kicked her out. When I explained my situation to him, he was understanding. He invited me to stay as long as I needed, and he was happy to have my company. Jack had a lot of land, but it didn't seem suitable for much. It was too rugged for farming and too sparse for ranching. Besides the main house, there were several barns and cattle pens. He had many horses, which I later learned were all for riding. People would come up on weekends to go horseback riding, usually only in the summer. The rest of the year wasn't very pleasant. On Sunday afternoon, we went to Trinity Dad to have dinner and pick up some essentials I had forgotten to bring with me. I managed to get a signal on my phone and called Jason. Son, I just wanted to let you know that I arrived safely. How are you doing? Not great. Dad. I explained everything to Josh, and he's really mad at Mom. He's not talking to her. Mom doesn't want to tell us what happened. She says she doesn't know why you left. I tried a few times to get her to say something, but she just clams up. Josh and I are trying our best to leave her alone as much as we can. It sounds like you're handling this pretty well. I'm sorry for the mess. Just do the best you can. I can't get a signal at the ranch, but Jack has a landline. I'll try to call from there. Is there anything I can do to help you guys? Will be fine. Uncle Jack's house had an interesting feature. Every building badly needed painting. I don't know how long he had lived there, but I'd bet there wasn't a single paintbrush on the whole ranch. At least I felt like I could earn my keep by doing something useful. There was a co-op nearby, and I bought all the 25L cans of red oxide paint they had. Of course, it all went on Jack's account. There was still a few months of good weather left, and I hoped to finish most of the outbuildings. The main house would have to wait until spring. For the next 2 weekends, I couldn't get through to Jason on his cell phone. I started to worry. Another 2 weeks passed with no news from the boys. It had been over a month. I thought I had given Jason Jack's landline number, but now I wasn't sure. It had been more than a month with no contact when they finally called me on the home phone. "Dad, it's Jason. Josh and I are in Santa Fe, and we need a ride. Can you come pick us up?" "What the heck are you doing in Santa Fe? How did you get there?" "I can't talk right now. I borrowed a guy's cell phone and promised not to take long. We're at the Sky Blue terminal. How soon can you get here? At least a couple of hours. Grab something to eat, we're leaving right now." 2 hours later, the boys were sitting in the back seat of the car, and we were heading north. They didn't have any luggage. Josh fell asleep right away. I tried calling several times. "Jason, what happened to your phone?" "Mom found out you were calling. She got mad, took my phone, and smashed it with a rolling pin. I was going to call the home number you gave me, but I decided to wait. I don't know why. Maybe I was hoping things would get better. Since you're here, I guess they didn't." About a month ago, Mom started going out at night. She wouldn't come home until after midnight, and she was always drunk. Sometimes she didn't even get up and go to work. She didn't even bother to call in or anything. Was she alone at first? Yes. Then one evening, about a week later, she brought a guy home. They were both pretty wasted. They went straight to Mom's room and started making a lot of noise. "You know what I mean, right? I get what you mean." What else happened? About an hour later, Josh and I went outside and let the air out of his car tires. We crossed the street to Mr. Simpson's house, and he let us sleep in his guest room. Mr. Simpson and I watched the guy when he came out the next morning. He was furious. It took the mechanic more than an hour to get there and fix all the tires. Mom stood on the porch in her robe for a while. We went straight to school. When we got home that day, Mom didn't say anything about it to us. Did that happen? Often only one more time. The next night, she brought home another guy, and we did the same thing. Except this time, we cut the valve stems. He had to get the car towed. He was really angry. Mr. Simpson got a big kick out of it. After that, she never brought any other guys home. Well, it seems like you guys managed it pretty well. She kept going out, lost in her thoughts, and usually didn't come back until the next morning. Sometimes she drove home, and sometimes guys just dropped her off. I don't know where she left her car. Oh yeah, one really odd thing, I almost forgot she bought 5 or 6 red dresses, and every time she went out, she wore one of them. At least Josh and I could sleep and eat at home. We got a lot of calls from the school and the school district asking where she was. Most of the time, she was asleep. A couple of days ago, she was kind of fired. There were some union rules that kept them from doing it officially, but they didn't let her come to work anymore. I'm not exactly sure how it all happened. I'm sorry about all of this. If I had known this would happen, I would never have left you there. So how did you end up here? Last night, around midnight, some guy dropped her off at home and kicked her out of his car. She got up, stumbled to the porch, and collapsed. We didn't know if she was dead or not. Her dress was ripped, and she looked terrible. That's when I decided it was time for us to go. I told Josh to call 911 and took a card from her wallet. I went to the computer and booked tickets for a flight from Philadelphia to Santa Fe and left the tickets at the counter. I wasn't sure if they would give tickets to a couple of kids. I almost bought tickets to Denver, but changed my mind at the last minute. It looks like it all worked out. We had to think on our feet a little. What do you mean? The ambulance arrived, and one of the guys called the police as soon as he saw Mom. They asked if anyone else was home. The police showed up just as they were loading Mom into the ambulance. It turned out she had a mix of alcohol and cocaine in her system. I didn't know Mom was using cocaine. I didn't know either, son. They asked a lot of questions, especially about the car that dropped her off, but we didn't know much. A little while later, a female officer came over to us. She was from Family Services and asked where you were. I told her you were in Colorado and that you had sent us the tickets. With the saddest look, I told her we had no way to get to the airport and needed an adult to get us through security. She made a few phone calls and eventually took us to the ticket counter. I think it was an easy way out for her, and everything worked out fine for us after the boys settled in. Jack and I stayed up until midnight discussing the situation. I had assumed Carla would start the divorce process after I left. But it seemed I was wrong. Of course, I never thought she would turn into a complete wreck. I think she had a lot of unfulfilled desires and was glad to have the chance to express them. I'm not really good at understanding why people do what they do. Jack didn't have a computer, so the next morning I had to use his phone. Eventually, I found a lawyer in Reading who was more than willing to prepare the divorce papers for me. When I mentioned Carla's name, he made it clear that he was aware of her situation. I think these guys are usually in the loop about what's going on at the police station. He said that her actions over the past few weeks would be easy to document, which would simplify the divorce process. I had to send the lawyer a money order for $2,000 that threw me off a bit, but Uncle Jack promised to help me financially if needed. The lawyer suggested that he would try to get child support from Carla since she earned more than I did. Of course, since she had lost her job, that would complicate things. I had to contact the boys' school, and they were very understanding about the situation. I think everyone in the school system knew about the escapades of my loving wife. They agreed without any problems to send all the school records and even copies of the birth certificates. I told the boys they could take it easy until the documents arrived. The next few months went smoothly. Carla signed the divorce papers but without child support. She lost her teaching credentials and had to find another job. I don't know what she ended up doing, but I'm sure it wasn't as respectable as her teaching position. All I had to do was wait another 3 months. Jason and Josh were both doing well at their new school. Every morning, they eagerly went to the bus stop. Jack and I refused to drive them. We told them it was a character-building exercise. A little sunshine must touch every life. I think I've exaggerated that saying a bit. What I mean is that sooner or later, something good will happen to all of us. For me, that happened in the last week of May. Jack assigned me to deliver 2 horses to a guy in Cloudcroft, about a 5-hour drive from here. I set out very early, hoping to return the same day. That part of my plan didn't work out too well. I had no trouble with the delivery. I never liked towing an empty trailer, but it was necessary. I was about 10 minutes away from Alamogordo when I ran into a roadblock. A truck full of illegal immigrants had overturned, and all the law enforcement and border patrol officers were combing the area. They were stopping and inspecting every vehicle, especially trailers and trucks. I never found out exactly what happened, but by the time I got through the checkpoint, I had to pee like a racehorse. About a mile down the road, I pulled over by a billboard and finally felt relieved. The big problem was that I had an audience. I returned to the truck and grabbed 2 bottles of water from the cooler. The older of the 2 girls snatched them and handed one to the little girl, who was about 4 years old. The older one looked to be in her late 20s. They were dirty, tired, thirsty, and hungry. I could see they were scared, so I didn't say anything. The older girl had long dark hair, thick eyebrows, dark eyes, and a golden complexion. The younger one was an exact miniature version. I turned toward the truck and motioned for them to follow me. I knew it was illegal, but I didn't care. They hesitated a bit, but cautiously made their way to the passenger door. The older one never took her eyes off me. We drove for about an hour before I needed gas. Before filling up the tank, I pointed to the restroom on the side of the station. They managed to go into the ladies' room and come out before I finished refueling. When I paid the bill, I grabbed a couple of pre-made sandwiches and 2 bottles of Coca-Cola. I was right, they were as hungry as they were thirsty. In Las Vegas, New Mexico, there was a large supermarket. I decided to stop there before heading onto the highway toward the pass. My 2 guests stayed close as I approached the greeter. Within a few minutes, I had a shopping assistant, an elderly lady who spoke Mexican. I guess it would be more accurate to say she spoke Spanish, but as far as I know, there's a difference. I quickly explained what I needed, and we headed straight to the children's section. In 15 minutes, we had a nice collection of underwear, pants, shirts, and socks for the little one. The older girl, or rather woman, took a bit more time. I kept my distance from the younger one while they picked out panties, bras, and everyday clothes for her. Then we went to the shoe department and bought comfortable sneakers for both of them. Our last stop was the health and beauty section, where we picked up toothbrushes, combs, and some feminine products. She seemed embarrassed by the last purchase, but she took them anyway. I thanked the store assistant who helped with the shopping. She smiled and hugged me. I don't think that's standard procedure. The bill was still under $200, so I was pleased. I decided to stay overnight. It had been a long day, and I thought the ladies could use a warm shower and a soft bed. I rented a room with 2 beds. We laid out all their new clothes on the bed, and before leaving, I pointed them to the shower. I called Jack, and he advised me not to rush back. I didn't mention my passengers, we would figure that out in the morning. I wasn't sure if he needed a cook and a housekeeper, but he was planning to hire them anyway. I couldn't help but smile to myself. About an hour later, I decided it was time to head back. I ordered a full dinner for 3. When I returned to the room, they were clean and fresh. My name is Bob. The smile I got in response to this little introduction was worth every penny I spent at Sam Walton's. "Myra," she said, pointing to herself. She smiled again and pointed to the little girl, Patina, then she pointed to me and said, "Bob, it felt like a funny version of an old Tarzan movie." I couldn't help but laugh, and within seconds, the 3 of us were digging into the meal. The chicken and sides were gone in no time by then. I was as hungry as they were. Naturally, we didn't have much to talk about. After we finished eating, I pointed to one of the beds, and they lay down while I took the other. I wanted to take a shower but decided against it. I slept on top of the covers, fully dressed. Myra seemed to appreciate that she and Patina slept in their new clothes. I was reluctant to go to a restaurant, so the next morning, I picked up a couple of McMuffins from a fast food place for breakfast. We got back to the ranch before noon. Well, Jack decided it was no big deal. The ranch house had plenty of rooms, so there was no issue finding space for Myra and Patina. Jack spoke a little Spanish and quickly found out that Patina was Myra's daughter, and that her husband had passed away. She had been trying to reach her brother, who worked as a mason in Alabama, when the truck overturned. Most people stayed there, but Myra decided it was better to try to slip away from the scene. I think that turned out to be the right choice on her part. Jack prepared lunch for all of us and told Myra that from now on, she would have to do the cooking herself. She seemed to like that, and so did I. Jack wasn't a very good cook. When the boys came home from school, they were happy to see Myra. They were very pleased with the dinner she made for us. I didn't know what the dish was, but it was delicious. She gave Jack a grocery list in Spanish for what she needed in the kitchen, which wouldn't be a problem in Trinidad. It looked like I would have to learn some Spanish while teaching her English. I could teach her words, but her grammar might end up as bad as mine. Myra quickly settled into the routine. She did the laundry, cleaned, cooked, and managed the household. Jack was glad that he didn't have to do those things anymore, and she was picking up English quickly. Now I understand where the term Spanglish comes from. By using a little of both languages, she learned to express herself quite well. Since Patina spent a lot of time with the boys and watching TV, she learned much faster than her mother. Sometimes she had to explain things to Myra, which her mother found very helpful. Patina was supposed to start school next year, so we were happy to see she was doing well. My divorce from Carla was finally complete. A couple of days later, she sent a few boxes with clothes for the boys and other items, including the original birth certificates. There was nothing of mine in the boxes. There was no note, no letter, nothing like that. I was curious about what she was doing, but not enough to ask any questions. Myra asked Jack why I was so happy. He explained it to her in Spanish, and she left the room with a big smile on her face. I think that was a good sign. Since Myra had her brother's address and cell phone number, she was able to call him. He regretted not being able to see her, but was glad she was okay. The call seemed to help her feel more grounded. The boys were becoming experts at handling the horses. After everything was painted, we spent a lot of time fixing up the house. We did things Jack had never had time for. Instead of just being a rundown old cowboy ranch, the place started to look more like a resort. Several people who boarded their horses with Jack asked if they could stay at the ranch instead of at a motel in town. We had plenty of empty rooms, and Myra thought it would be nice if she could help with that. She said it with a light laugh, but Jack actually thought it was a good idea. The price included dinner and breakfast with the ranch hands, as well as the room. Jack had to get a license and install fire safety equipment, but a month later, Myra had her own bed and breakfast operation. A few weeks after that, a small article about the ranch appeared in the Santa Fe newspaper, and before you knew it, Lazy Jack's became a popular spot for tourists. Jack had to buy more horses so the tourists would have something to ride. He also had to buy a computer, which the boys set up in no time. Thank goodness for DirecTV and satellite internet service. Business slowed down a bit over the winter. Jack added 4 more rooms to the house, Myra bought a new Viking stove, and Jason got his driver's permit. I spent a lot of time painting, sanding, staining, and just working. I was glad that Jack and the boys handled most of the work with the horses. In the evenings, the boys worked on the ranch's website. Josh had already booked a table for next spring and was also teaching Patina how to read. We had to open accounts with all the major credit card companies. We were so busy during the slow season that we started to worry about the upcoming year. Whenever she could, Myra would sit with me. We didn't talk much, but it was always nice to have her close by. She made sure I always had coffee or whatever else I was drinking at the time. We got better at communicating, but I was a slow learner and a bit awkward in conversation. Jason tried a few times to nudge me toward being more friendly with Myra, but I didn't quite manage it. It was just before Christmas when she made the decision for me. Bob, I think it's time for Patina to have her own bed in her own room. Do you agree? I think so, yes. That's a good idea. We should have done it sooner. Good. I'm glad you see it that way. Today, I'm going to move my things into your room, but I need a dresser. Could you move the second dresser from Pa's room into your room? It's too heavy for me to. Move, of course, I can move it for you, Myra. I don't want to offend you, but there's only one bed in my room that's fine. Don't worry. I don't take up much space. I was surprised by how well she spoke English. I thought that maybe some part of this conversation had been planned in advance. I suspected either my friendly host or my scheming sons. In any case, she made her point, and I was flattered. I was very careful not to do anything that might upset her. I certainly didn't want her to think I would take advantage of her or her situation. I think she understood that herself. I would love to impress you with stories of how wonderfully I courted Myra and convinced her to be mine, but I can't. I think I fell in love with her from the moment I saw her, but I couldn't bring myself to admit it to her or to myself. It was a relief to find out that she felt the same way and had the courage to do what I couldn't. We got married on Christmas. It was just family and a few local friends. The following year was fantastic for Lazy Jack's. We had so many bookings that we had to turn some away. Myra hired a young girl to help in the kitchen, and Jason took an interest in her. I think that's a good sign. Sadly, Jack passed away at the end of the summer. He left everything to Myra and me, not just the ranch but also mineral rights worth over $1 million. The boys were doing great, and Patina was growing like a weed. Life was wonderful. When Carla left the Palmer confectionery factory, it was cold and damp. She had worked the midnight to 8 a.m. shift, attaching eyes to chocolate Easter bunnies. In one hand she carried a large bag, and in the other, an envelope with her paycheck. As she walked into the local diner for breakfast for the 100th time, she pulled a worn copy of People magazine from her bag, and it automatically opened to page 48. She stirred cream into her coffee while staring at a picture of her younger son, Josh, helping Julia Roberts onto a Palomino horse. On the next page, the owner of Lazy Jack Ranch, Bob Terrell, and his wife Myra stood on the porch of their lovely ranch home with Cameron Diaz. Before finishing her meal, she would read the entire article, just as she did every week. After setting the magazine aside, she checked to see if she had enough money. The thrift stores were set to open in 20 minutes. Maybe this week would be a lucky one. Although Carla already had 16 red dresses, she always felt the need for one more. There can never be too many red dresses. Thank you for listening until the end. See you in the next episode of Cheating Stories. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye.